Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do my standard Friday Reads video where I wrap up the week in reading and other bookish things, talk about some things that have been going on in the world, bookish world, whatever. I have a lot to report on the book front, but we'll get to the Friday Reads portion in a little bit. There are just a couple of things I want to cover first. First of all, I should say, I don't know if you can actually hear this, but Guinness is just off camera over here in a chair, snoring his head off. So if you hear a low rumbling, that's what that is. If you don't hear anything, pretend I didn't say anything. But anyway, the first thing I want to mention before we get to the Friday Reads is that you may have seen, but I am going to be co-hosting the next round of the LGBTQ in Translation read-along for 2022. I had offered to help Jen the librarian with the LGBTQ in Translation read-along because I think it's such a great thing, and she asked if I would take the lead on the next section. So this will be for the book that we read in April and May. And for the next week, you can vote on which book we will read, whether it be Before Night Falls by Reinaldo Arenas, translated by Dolores M. Koch, or Disoriental by Négar Djavadi, translated by Tina Kover, who actually voted for her own book on the video, which is totally fair. And I thought that was a little cool. So if you want to vote, don't do it on this video. I will put a link to the video where you can actually vote in the description box down below. Please go there and vote. And if you are unfamiliar with either one of these books, in that video, I tell you about them. So you can go there, find out about both of the books, and leave a vote in the comment section of that video. Again, not this video, please. Just so I have only one place that I need to look. It will really help me out. But you can vote for one of these on that video, and you can help decide. I will probably be reading both. I'm really looking forward to both, and I look forward to reading them with you, but you can vote on the video in the description box down below and find out about both of the books there. I will say both books should be pretty easily acquirable. I got both of them used from Powell's, and there were other copies that were available at the time I ordered them, so hopefully they still are. I had thought that my library had a copy, but apparently I'm mistaken because I looked this week after I posted the video just to double check, and they actually did not have Disoriental. But I did casually check a local used bookstore, and they actually do have it. So, and like I said, Powell's had a bunch of copies. So they should be fairly easy to get, whether you are in the UK or in the United States or elsewhere in the world. We are planning to have a winner by next Friday, so there will be plenty of time to get yourself a copy of the book, either from the library or used or new, however you live your life, by April, if you would like to get started on them then. So the other thing I wanted to talk about really quickly is just a fun thing that I purchased. I have been a fan of Gaze the Word, a bookstore in London, for a while now. I've been kind of following them, and I would love to visit the store. It is an LGBTQ bookstore in London. I believe it was opened in 1979, and I would love to visit them someday. But with the pandemic, who knows when that would ever be. I saw this watercolor of the front of their store by Kris Lloyd, who has an Etsy shop, and I'll put a link to it in the description box down below because he has a lot of really great stuff. I think there were 2 of these left when I looked earlier this week, so you could still get one, but they would be going fast. He also does commission work. And the Etsy shop said that it wouldn't ship to the United States, so Jen the librarian kindly offered to actually order it for me and then ship it to me. So thank you to Jen. Actually, it turns out, in talking to the artist, he will ship to the United States. So if you are in the US like me, you don't need a Jen the librarian to ship it to you, although it helps. And again, thank you, Jen. I am so happy to have this. I think it's absolutely adorable. What a cheerful little watercolor of this store. I would love to get there someday. I'm so excited to have this. And I need to decide, get it framed and figure out where we're going to put it. Probably the library, but it's something I definitely want to have in a location where I can just gaze at it adoringly all the time. So we'll see. To be determined where we will put it. And then the only other thing I want to talk about in the book world is that the Women's Prize long list will be coming next week. I am not going to do a prediction for that video. It's funny, to me, it seems overwhelming to do a Women's Prize prediction video for the long list because there are just so many possibilities. It gets overwhelming. And yet I do this for the Pulitzers, but I don't want to do it for the Women's Prize. But I am planning to do a reaction to the long list once it is announced. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm thinking there are some really strong contenders for it this year. It will be interesting to see what makes the long list. And if you have predictions, I'd love to hear them in the comment section down below, because I will not be doing a prediction, but I am very interested in seeing what gets on the list. We have also been working our way through Pose. We did get season 3, but we've been going slowly. We really binged the first 2 seasons hard, but there's only one more season. So in one respect, we are trying to take it more slowly so it lasts a little bit longer. But there are also some kind of heavy things early in the 3rd season. For instance, there's an episode that deals with an intervention, which was very triggering for me. So once that was done, I needed something happy. We couldn't go into another episode of Pose. I was like, I need the Golden Girls right now. So that's how we're going through. But it's a really great show. And I'll say, I think Blanca is quickly becoming one of my favorite TV characters of all time, which is a very select group. I think the only other people in that group are Mary Richards and Liz Lemon. And Mary Richards is clearly my all-time favorite. But now it would be Mary Richards, Liz Lemon, and Blanca. And we'll see how that plays out in the rest of the 3rd season. I'm really enjoying that show a lot. I'm also going to link the Protect Trans Kids bonfire campaign from Montana Book Company down below. There's not a whole lot of time left in that campaign, but if you want to check it out, please do. And if it's the day that this video is published, which is Saturday, please check it out. And I also wanted to say really quickly, in that video, somebody commented and said something about the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. And the person who left the comment was not trying to imply that I was ignoring that, but I immediately felt bad because I hadn't said anything about it. And it's not that I was trying to ignore that news. It's more that it just makes me so angry that it's difficult to talk about. And what I will say is, if you can find ways to support the LGBTQ community, please do, whether it be purchasing a t-shirt from the campaign, which will go to support the Trans Law Center, whether it be writing to your legislature to try to make sure that these things don't happen in your state, because I'm terrified that these things are going to come to my state. As someone who is part of the LGBTQ community, and it's not good to feel like your marriage, your ability to be employed or served in a shop is potentially at risk. So if you have any way of fighting laws like that, please do so. And I haven't really talked about Ukraine or Russia other than to just talk about how stressful the world is right now, because it's a little overwhelming. Everything is a little overwhelming. And it feels like the world's on fire and nothing is really set, or a lot of different things could happen. So however you are coping, I hope you are finding a way, whether it be reading or spending a lot of time in movies, whatever it is. I hope you have a way to healthily cope with the world, because it's a lot. It really is. But let's get into the actual Friday Reads portion of this video. Like I said, I have a lot to talk about because I finished 2 books since the last time we spoke. And if you watched my February wrap-up and my March plans video, which I will also link in the description box down below, you already got a quick update because I did manage to finish Beloved by Toni Morrison in the month of February. And I talked about a book that I had started in February and I'm carrying into March. And I did actually ultimately finish that book, but we'll talk about that one next. Now, I'm going to save a lot of my conversation about Beloved for a specific video because this is part of my Pulitzer Prize project. I am trying to read every book that won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. And what I will say about this is that I hadn't quite thought about it from this perspective, but it actually was the perfect book to follow Gone with the Wind as part of my Pulitzer Prize project, because I feel like Gone with the Wind is trying to deny everything that Beloved is revealing. And I'm trying to pick and choose my way thoughtfully through the Pulitzer Prize books. And that was a bit of an accident, but it was like a happy accident. Mostly the timing on Beloved worked because this is when both Amelia and I could do a buddy read of it. We had been planning to read Beloved together after we read Song of Solomon together, and it just kind of worked out that way. This is a really tremendous book. It is also a very difficult book difficult emotionally, difficult in terms of density, and it really feels like going through an emotional ringer. And that is also very deliberate on Toni Morrison's part. She kind of wants you to feel uncomfortable. She wants you to be reckoning with things that are difficult and sad and painful. And that's not particularly pleasant, but it's so well done. I think this is pretty undisputably her masterpiece. Although if you told me to reread a Toni Morrison book, I would pick the Song of Solomon. So thinking like a critic, Beloved is clearly her masterpiece, and it absolutely, I would say, deserved to win the Pulitzer Prize. She deserved to win the Nobel Prize. I think she should have won more than one Pulitzer Prize, frankly. Now, as I said, I'm going to save a lot of my discussion of this book for a different video, but I will say this is a really urgent read because Toni Morrison is trying to prompt you through this small story, or small seeming story, of a mother being haunted by the ghost of her dead daughter. She is prompting you to think about the legacy of slavery, and she is talking about how you can't move on from painful things like that without reckoning with them. But she is prompting the reader to try to do that, and it's really difficult because she's also talking about the hypocrisies of well-meaning white people. There are a couple of well-meaning white people characters. There are some not so well-meaning white characters in this book. There are not always white characters in Toni Morrison books, but there are in this one. And it seems very deliberately trying to say we need to reckon with this, but particularly to white people. You can't ignore this. It did exist, it still exists, and you can't just hide it away. And unfortunately, that is still a very timely message and a very urgent message for anyone living in the United States, anyone living anywhere in the world, really, but particularly the United States. And it's just a tremendous book. I'm really glad I finally got around to reading it, and I had a great experience reading it with Amelia. So stay tuned for more eventually at some point. I don't know when I will get to a specific video about it, but I will be trying. Now, the other book, which I had mentioned in my February wrap-up, and which I finished this week, was Book Boyfriend by Kris Ripper. In my wrap-up, I had mentioned that I really struggled with the beginning of this book. I think by the time I was about 6% in, I was ready to put it down, but I didn't, because I got this from NetGalley, and as part of that, I agreed to review it. And I feel like I can't DNF it, certainly not that early, if I'm going to write a review of it. So I really made an effort to try to push my way through. And basically, the problem I was having with it is that it seems like it's trying really hard to be cute and funny in the beginning in a way that felt painful to me. The protagonist is this mess of, it's just a mess. He is clumsy, he is self-absorbed, he is not very thoughtful at all, and just not somebody you really want to spend time with. And this occasionally happens in romances where it goes in really hard trying to make a character kind of blind to something in the beginning, and in this one it's the self-absorption and the inability to really express how he feels that are in the way, but it goes in so hard on those things that you just hate him right away. I think if this was an audiobook narrated by Michael Urie, I probably would have been able to forgive it a little more, but it's not. And I really was struggling a lot. And I do like that the love interest is non-binary, or comes out as doesn't say non-binary, but starts using they, them pronouns halfway through the book. And that is, the acceptance of that is really beautiful. And I liked that. But the book never really overcame that beginning. It started to get a little bit better and then kind of dipped back down for me. And I think part of that is that the romantic interest is a romantic. That sounds like a terrible sentence. The romantic interest is a romantic, but is into romance. And what's kind of clever is that the book is playing with traditional cliched ideas of what romance is, and all of these big sweeping gestures that people make and which are intended to be romantic, but real romance is very small and intimate a lot of the time. And I thought that was interesting and very true, but the way the book handles that it felt a little ham-handed, being honest, because the protagonist of the book makes this really big romantic sweeping gesture about halfway through the book, and it lands with this really big thud. And that, of course, is the thing that kind of separates the two members of this romance at the center of the book for a while, and which they have to overcome. But the level of anger about that romantic gesture really just feels wrong. It feels off. And it doesn't feel like someone who is that much of a romantic would be that angry about someone making a romantic gesture, even if they did it in a kind of ham-handed, clumsy, little bit selfish way. So, yeah, there's that. The premise of the book is that, I'm forgetting his name already, the protagonist works for a publisher, and he has been in love with his friend Art for a while. They had a drunken kiss in college when they were roommates, and then it never went any further because they had been drinking too much. And the day after, Art, the roommate rather, laughs it off. And it's like, oh, wasn't that a crazy thing? Ha ha ha, I can't believe we did that. And even though, I can't believe I can't remember the protagonist's name, even though he actually really is very interested in Art, he allows himself to be sort of friend zoned for the next few years. Art is in a relationship and has a really bad breakup and ends up living with Art ends up living with the protagonist whose name I can't remember. And they are roommates. And because he can't express his feelings for Art, he ends up writing a romance novel about someone who is in love with their best friend. He shares it with a coworker who doesn't realize he wrote it, and it ends up getting published. And he feels like he can't tell Art because he's worried that Art will recognize themselves and him and realize what has been going on. But Art works in a bookstore, gets an ARC of the book, and loves it. And once they love it, the protagonist feels like he can't tell him. So it becomes this whole thing. And then he makes a plan to reveal. And that's where things go wrong at the halfway point of the book. And they have a very cute relationship. Like I said, I do really like the representation of Art being someone who is, I don't want to call them non-binary, but who clearly plays with the idea of gender. They wear skirts, they wear nail polish and makeup, and start using they, them pronouns halfway through the book. I thought that was pretty cool, but the rest of the book just didn't really land for me. So it's fine. It did really what I needed it to do, but it also was escapist in a way that was a little more on the irritating side for me. So I feel like I'm ready to get back to serious books, which I really needed a break from after Beloved. So my plans for next, let's talk about audio first, because I am making a shift in direction on that. I had been listening to the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois for a long time, and I just really haven't been listening to audiobooks this year. And it's been a big surprise. If you follow along, you already know, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it. But my reading habit around audiobooks has just shifted drastically in 2022. I don't seem to be making any progress at all on audiobooks. So I was listening to Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois for a long time, over a month. And it doesn't seem fair to the book, because I really am enjoying it. It has nothing to do with the book. And it doesn't seem fair to me either to keep trying and failing like that. So I got myself on a hold list for this book at the library instead. And there are only 3 people ahead of me, so hopefully I'll be getting it soon. And maybe since I'm having more success with print books, that will be a better way for me to read it anyway. So rather than keep trying and failing at an audiobook, I decided I was going to pivot to try something else on audio. And lo and behold, the next day, Nick Offerman's book, Where the Deer and the Antelope Play, I'm going to need to refer to the full title, Where the Deer and the Antelope Play, the Pastoral Observations of One Ignorant American Who Loves to Walk Outside, became available on Libby. I had put a hold on it back in, I think, November. And it only just became available now. And I thought, well, Nick Offerman is a really charming, funny guy. And this book was recommended to me. I couldn't remember who had recommended it to me. And then I posted on Twitter how funny it is when you wait such a long time for a book that you don't remember who recommended it. And it turned out it was Charlie from the Montana Book Company. So I'm glad I figured that out. But anyway, so I figured I would try this book. And it seems to be doing the trick. I'm having a little bit more luck, but I'm still struggling with audio. So it's been, I think, 3 or 4 days, and I'm only at, I think, 11 or 12%. I made a lot of progress the first night, and I didn't even listen to it at all yesterday. So it's kind of proving the point that it's not the books, it's my capacity to listen to audio at the moment. But I think this is a good book that's going to try to help me work through that a little bit and at least finish something on audio, because it's an interesting book. Basically, in the first chapter, Nick Offerman meets George Saunders and Jeff Tweedy to go hiking in Glacier National Park, which is in my backyard. So that was really fun. He flies into the Kalispell airport and talks about huckleberries, which I am in love with. Huckleberries are one of the things that convinced me to move to Montana in the first place. So that was really fun and exciting. And I think that will help me get through an audiobook, but clearly it's still going to be slow going. So we'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, I was totally book hungover after Beloved. It took me about 2 days to pick up Book Boyfriend. And if I'm being honest, I really skimmed through a good portion of the middle of that book. Yeah, after Beloved, I totally felt book hungover, like I'd been slapped in the head with a 2x4 and needed to process. I was just dazed. So I eventually managed to finish Book Boyfriend, not my best, most thorough reading of a book ever. And I think that was the only way I was going to work my way back into a book, because Beloved just left me dazed for a while. Now that we're heading into the weekend, I think I'm ready to get back into book world, and I will be picking up The Wrong End of the Telescope by Rabi Alameddine, and I'm really looking forward to this book. I had read the first 2 pages before I decided that I needed something a little bit more escapist about 2 weeks ago now. Which is when I picked up Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. And then when I still needed something escapist because I was finishing Beloved, I ended up reading Book Boyfriend. But now I'm ready for The Wrong End of the Telescope. I do have another library book, Gravelheart by Abdul Razak Gurnah, who won the Nobel Prize last year. But I think I want to try to get to Wrong End of the Telescope first because it will be due back first, but because I was really looking forward to it and I've had it for 2 weeks now. So I managed to renew my loan on it, so it's not late. I don't know why I feel like I need to explain that, but that's what happened. So that will probably be my next book. I will be working on it this weekend. Unfortunately, tomorrow morning, we have some errands to run. The dogs are getting haircuts, and that means we can't sit around and read in the morning, but hopefully Sunday morning, I'll be able to make a good chunk of progress on that. So that is the reading world for me right now. I'd love to hear what you have going on. Do you ever have book hangovers? Am I the only one? Because it had been a while since I'd had one. I can't remember the last book that just put me in a daze, but Beloved did it for sure. I can't remember the last time I finished a book and just had to sit on it, my feelings for days. But yeah, Beloved certainly did it. And it absolutely makes sense that this was the type of book that you would need to process and allow to settle before jumping into another book. But yeah, if you have had book hangovers, let me know what the last one you had was, because I would be genuinely curious. And I'd love to hear what you've been reading, what you've been loving, and all of that stuff. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.